Hi, I'm Craig Ferryman, and QMTV's Meet the Candidates now meets Hesham Zakai, a final year undergrad in English Literature at King's College London. He is the editor of the Creative Writing Society's novel Ashes to Ashes, and was the founder and editor of his sixth form magazine. He joins us now. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Now, for you, what is the role of the media, and how, if at all, does student media differ from national media?
Okay, well, two parts to the question, so I'll try to address them each individually. The media, I think, has a very important role within the context of the University of London, because I think we operate within a system whereby it's a very disparate system, if you like. There's some very big colleges and there's some very small colleges, and geographically as well, many of them are very far apart. So the media plays a very important role in sort of weaving these separate colleges, these separate strands of life together, and helping to create a united, sort of more universal university experience, bringing different experiences together and allowing each college to connect with another, allowing each sort of field and discipline to connect with another. In terms of how does it differ from the national media, I think it has to be a much more student-centric focus to it. There has to be a much more student-centric focus. I mean, I think over the last year it's been a very obvious example of how it could differ, although there's obviously been, the national media's had a much more student-centric focus, but in terms of protests, in terms of fees, in terms of education reforms, I think these are issues that are very important to students and that students want to be knowing more about from a student perspective, from a student point of view.
Now, you are essentially being elected to be a journalist, so what experience do you feel that you have to qualify you for this role, but also what experience do you have in terms of managing a paper, from advertising to editorial to printing and so on?
Okay, and again, two parts, I'll try to address both individually again. In terms of writing, I mean, I studied English literature and language at King's College, so throughout the 3 years I spent at King's, I've had a very sort of rigorous academic experience in writing essays. I'm currently writing my dissertation. Alongside that, I've maintained what I would sort of say is a high velocity and volume of writing outside of my course. Things like the Raw, which is the King's College, I beg your pardon, King's College newspaper, okay. The Notebook, and a separate creative writing publication, and Fourth London Student. So I've been constantly writing and constantly trying to hone my creative and discursive abilities in that respect. With regards to my slightly more managerial experience, as you mentioned at the start, I did edit the Creative Writing Society novel, an idea that was conceived upon collectively and that we've advanced and continued and even proliferated this year, editing that novel, working with about 20 different writers that had to write for that novel a chapter each. It sort of taught me quite a lot about time management, about working with others, about collaboration.
Okay. Now, as the paper meant to hold ULU and its officers to account, how do you intend to ensure that the paper is neutral from the institution?
Well, I mean, I think that this year there's been a change systematically within the London Student, in the sense that it's now the editor of the paper as opposed to the president of the University of London Union that oversees the libel checks and that has the final say on what goes into it. So I think that the paper is independent. And it's not, I mean, the editor has the editorial independence and the freedom to be able to express and to hold elected representatives, mandated representatives to account. And I think that is an integral part of the job.
Now, how will you seek to try and increase participation of the paper, both in terms of its contributors but also in terms of its readers?
Well, I think in this regard I can draw upon my experience with the Creative Writing Society. The Creative Writing Society at King's College was founded whilst I was in my first year, and we were very much finding our feet. I immediately took on a responsibility. I became the events organiser, and I helped to organise an event with the late Professor David Noakes, who was a professor of creative writing at King's, about how to write and how one could improve their writing and why one should be writing constantly. I would draw on that sort of experience, which essentially entails creating events which help people know more about writing, how they can write more, what kinds of things they can write, and slowly branch out from there. I also think in order to increase representation within the paper needs to strive to be a bit more diverse, to include traditionally marginalised or ostracised groups.
Now, the London Student has a circulation of about 10,000 at the moment, though there are 120,000 students in the University of London Union. Obviously not everybody will read a paper, but who in your mind is the sort of student who will go to their campus and pick up a copy of the London Student?
I mean, the answer to that question would have to be going back to your second figure of 120,000. I don't want a paper that would be tailored specifically to one particular individual or one particular type or code of student. I do want a paper that appeals to absolutely every student, and it is difficult because you can't. I mean, it is very difficult to appeal to 120,000 students. However, I think especially this year with the paper being a 56-page publication, there is scope and there is the capacity to appeal to students to make it a broad, inclusive paper.
Okay, now with new media becoming increasingly a part of how people consume news, how do you plan to take London Student in that direction?
Well, I think a key part of my manifesto has been the technological side. But what I would stress is that the paper, the print version of the paper, would be kept in its traditional format. So for those people who are slightly more traditional and are sort of fearing of this all-powerful technology taking over, I would try to reassure them that the paper and print format would remain. However, there is this whole new world which is being opened up to us, which I think absolutely we should be buying into. What I plan to introduce. As well as redesigning the website and having it go live and being a much more dynamic website, I also want to have blogs which ordinary students can contribute to, video blogs which ordinary students can upload, and podcasts. These are simple things that students can do in their spare time, can enjoy to do, but also that will increase representation and participation, going back to your previous question about increasing contribution and representation.
Okay, now where do you think the balance needs to be between holding ULU to account but also promoting the campaigns, initiatives and facilities to its membership?
I mean, I don't think there's a mutual exclusivity between the two, if I'm entirely honest. I think absolutely it should be holding elected representatives to account. I think it should be matching their actions and their deeds with their manifesto and what they are saying they would do and what they pledged to do. But I don't think that that's a thing apart from campaigns which the University of London students have time and time again shown that they are passionate about, that they're committed to and that they want to fully engage in. I think actually the key question is can we maintain a spirit of harmony between the two, rather than sort of see them as things apart that are constantly sort of battling with each other and that we're constantly trying to reconcile.
Now, how do you think the current editor of the London Student has done this year, generally, but also most particularly with regards to his coverage of the Millbank riots?
Well, I mean, Joe Renison, the current editor, I would say, he ran on a very specific mandate. He won the elections and he's enacted that mandate rather, pretty much to the syllable, give and take a couple of things which he'll freely admit he hasn't managed to do. So in that regard, he set out his policies, he was elected and mandated to carry out those policies, and he has. So I think that students can't have complaints in terms of the democratic way in which he's gone about things. In terms of the paper and how it's been, I think generally it has been good, but what I would say is that and Joe Renison sort of has his key emphasis on impartiality. I think that there's two dangers with impartiality, and some of them we've slightly slipped into. On the one hand, I think apathy. I think impartiality sometimes leads to apathy, and I think on the other hand, impersonality. And I think that with regards to the sort of student protest, I think it felt a bit too much, for me anyway, that what was going on with students, what was going on with higher education as a whole, was something that was going on in the middle, and that the London student was at the sideline sort of cheering on, or if that. I think if I was to make a slight change on how Joe has run, I think that the London student should be at the centre of what students are clamouring for or protesting for.
Sure. Okay, now, you claim your manifesto to be a regular contributor to London Student, yet you haven't actually written at all for it this year, and my sources tell me that in terms of Raw, the paper of King's, you've only submitted I think it's 2 articles this year. So what other experience do you have in the media that can qualify you to be the editor of a paper that has a 10,000 print run?
Yeah, with regards to what it says on my manifesto, I wrote that I've been regularly contributing to Raw, London Student and the Notebook as a whole. So the grammatical construction of the sentence is over my 3 years, which I'm essentially trying to convey that I have maintained a regularity of writing, which I absolutely have done. With regards to sort of the experiences, it's as I was saying earlier, it's things like writing regularly as part of my academic discipline, writing creatively as part of the Creative Writing Society. I've set up a blog this year for students, and I've blogged on other sites in the past as well.
But nevertheless, this year in the London Student, you haven't written at all, but you want to be the editor of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I would say is I don't think it should be a prerequisite to have written in a particular paper over the past 6 months to be able to handle and manage that paper well, particularly if the role of the editor or the editor sees their role as being a directional one, a directive one, and a visionary one.
Okay, now going again back to your manifesto, you want to make this more of a campaigning paper. But since London Students moved towards being one of a more impartial stance and reporting news, the distribution has increased from 6,000 to 10,000. So how do you explain this if you believe that students want a campaigning paper?
Well, I mean, I don't think that there's any evidence of any kind of direct correlation that the reason that the print has increased has been due to less campaigns. I mean, I think that the figures cannot possibly be saying that when there's so many elements that go into the production and print and publication and dissemination of a newspaper. In terms of a campaigning paper, I think you only have to go into any students' union to see how important campaigns are to students, especially over the past 12 months. Over the past 12 months, we've seen really huge educational reforms, which a lot of students have felt passionate about, and a lot of students have come out onto the streets about. I mean, I think that question could just as easily be subverted and saying, how can we have had the largest student demonstrations for the past 20 years if students don't care about campaigns? I mean, I think absolutely they do, and I think that the London student, if it wants to represent students honestly and openly, then it should be a part of those campaigns.
But what would you attribute to the increase?
I mean, I think there's several factors. In terms of the increase and in terms of print, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of the office with the previous editor and the current editor. So I'm not really at liberty to say, well, I don't have the kind of privilege of information to say why more copies have been printed and distributed this year.
Now you talk about wanting to create an up-to-date website. It has actually been worked on all year and is about to launch. So with this being the case, do you think that you know enough about London Student to be able to take it over?
Yeah, I absolutely know enough about London Student. Again, the website hasn't as yet been launched, so there's no possible way in which I could have said, oh, the website that may launch or that the website that may come. I know that, having spoken with Joe, I know that he's planning on releasing the website before he leaves office, which I think is fantastic. And when that website is released with all its features, I'll sit down, hopefully with Joe, should I be elected, should the people decide that I'm the person that they want to run the London Student, and I'll see what the website does offer and what it doesn't offer, and we can hopefully see collectively how we can make it better, make it an improved dynamic website.
Okay, now London Student is meant to represent and be accessible to all 120,000 students that form part of the University of London Union and its membership. So if the paper is going to be partial, how will it end up representing all those students?
In terms of representing everyone, I think that you will be hard pressed, to find an issue or something that 120,000 students will agree on. The purpose of the paper is not to homogenise 120,000 students or to sort of narrow them down and make one sort of ideological uniform strand of thinking. That's not the point of the paper. The point of the paper, however, is to be a space where students who want to campaign about certain things, who want to raise awareness about certain things, who want to fundraise for certain things can do so. And it doesn't necessarily need 120,000 students to agree with that in order for it to be an adequate or fair aim.
Now you have a quote from Hilary Arkhead, who was the London Student Editor 2009 to 10 on your manifesto. She constantly missed deadlines and reduced the readership of the paper under her leadership, as well as having several members of her editorial team actually resigning. So is her endorsement the best endorsement that you could possibly have?
Well, I have various endorsements, vast and wide. Ryan Wayne, for example, in his personal capacity, I should stress, the president of KCLSU and re-elected, endorses me. Various other people, Michael Chesham, Ashok, Jasper Kane, president of the SOAS Students' Union, and so on and so forth. But I don't think that this is an election that I want to be won on the basis of endorsements. I think it's the kind of election that I want to be won on the basis of my vision for the paper and what I want to do with the paper. With regards to Hilary, again, I cannot say what went on behind the scenes, why print was higher or lower. Earlier you attributed the higher print in order to campaigning, and now it's due to Hilary. Again, I don't think either of us can accurately say why print did go up and down without the privileged behind-the-scenes information that goes into making a newspaper.
But why did you choose her?
Why did I choose
to endorse you?
To endorse me? Because Hilary knows me. Hilary knows me well. Hilary ran the London Student, and a lot of students were very happy with the London Student under Hilary. I think she did a fantastic job.
Okay.
And
Hesham Zakai, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.